Hi, I'm Claire, and I am a veterinarian and professor at the University of Calgary's Faculty of Veterinary Medicine. There, my job is about 50-50 teaching and research, and my area of interest is the epidemiology of calf health. So you're not familiar with the term epidemiology. It's essentially the scientific study of patterns of disease within groups of animals. And so the organizers asked me to come and talk to you about professional skill development for a career in STEM. Although a lot of the things I think I'm going to talk about today could be considered by some to be soft skills, I would argue they're probably some of the most critical skills to have a professional career, both in STEM as well as just to be a general human in this world. They asked me to first talk a bit about my personal journey, though, so that's where I'm going to start. So I grew up in rural Nova Scotia, just outside of Halifax, and with the exception of a few mild childhood traumas, I think I had a pretty uneventful childhood. I lived a relatively, I would say, privileged life. My parents worked hard. We didn't have a lot, but we always had food on the table and a safe and secure home. So I consider myself to have been a pretty lucky kid. When I graduated to high school, I went off to the University of Guelph to do an undergraduate degree in science, and then I got into the Ontario Veterinary College, which I graduated from in 2006. I then went off to rural mixed practice in southern Alberta, did that for a little while before returning to the University of Guelph to do a postgraduate doctoral degree in ruminant health management. I then did what any normal grad student would do, which is I moved halfway around the world and I started working with dairy farmers in rural Nepal, which was an amazing experience. I then returned back to Canada and took up my faculty position here at the University of Calgary. And I get to do fun things like you can see in this picture, which was me working with 3 of my graduate students out in the field doing field research where we're lucky enough to simultaneously all 4 of us get pooped on by the same calf at the same time. So we were having lots of fun that day. So that might seem like a relatively straightforward path, a very linear progression of a career. But at the risk of talking about myself too much, I'd like to tell you a little bit more of the truth of the matter, which is there were a lot of bumps and turns in the road and unexpected changes of direction that I think actually are probably far more critical in having delivered me to where I am today, as well as having made me the person who I am today. So there were a few hurdles along the way, essentially. And the first one I want to tell you about is I'd had the lifelong dream of becoming a veterinarian ever since I was a little kid, like many vets. And it wasn't long after I got into vet school that I realized I was hating it. I hated vet school. And I looked around and I saw these classmates who were older and had done all these neat things and been all these places. And all I'd ever done was work hard and study hard with this goal of getting into vet school. And there I was. And it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. We were memorizing anatomy and spending hours with our heads in our eyes on microscopes trying to learn histology. And it just wasn't what I had expected. But I talked to friends and people that I trusted, and they kind of told me, no, it'll get better, stick it out. So I did, because I'm nothing if not persistent. And it did get better. We started learning more clinical stuff. I started seeing the relevance of things more, and it just became a lot better as the time went on. Which brings me to my next little story, which was at the end of 3rd year when we had to pick our courses for our final clinical year. And I was selecting to go into the food animal stream. So I wanted to be a food animal veterinarian. And one of the professors called me into his office to tell me he was concerned about my career choices. He didn't think that I had what it took to be a food animal veterinarian. And so I left that office, had a good cry. I talked again to some friends and people I trusted, and they kind of helped me see that I had a choice. I could listen to him or I could prove him wrong. And so I decided 2 things out of that meeting. 1, I was going to work my butt off to prove him wrong. And 2, I was never going to be that person who tried to crush other people's dreams. And I hope that I still do that. I still try not to be that person, essentially. So I graduated vet school. I went off to practice. And again, I found myself being pretty disillusioned with this lifelong dream I'd had. I was going to be James Herriot, and I was going to go off and save all the animals. And I just found that I wasn't that happy in practice. So, the practice I was in was busy, but it was in the after effects of BSE. I was not a confident new grad at all, and there wasn't a ton of support and mentorship within that practice. So between those things and some personal life stuff, I found myself calling some professors and trying to find a way back to Guelph to go to grad school. I kind of got passed around, nobody had opportunities, and they said, oh, somebody else might have one. I got passed around from professor to professor until I finally found Professor Leslie, who ended up becoming one of my supervisors, and he had a project on calf health. So I went back to Guelph and I found my happy place. I discovered I loved research. I loved calf health. I loved epidemiology. I just happened to find it because I had to take some epi courses, and it was totally my jam. And it still is to this day. I love it more and more every day. There was a lot of sort of misdirection, I guess, where I thought I was going one way and it didn't turn out to be what I thought. I found myself eventually finding the thing that I was, I guess, meant to do, which leads me to my last little story I want to tell you about, which is, after all of that, I got my professor job here at the university, and I was 30. I was a 30-year-old woman in a professor position, and I met a lot of people who would look at me and go, well, you don't look like a professor, which at first in those days made me really worry. I thought, I don't have what it takes. I don't belong here. I'm not what a professor is supposed to be. And now, over a decade later, I finally, well, people don't say that to me as much anymore because I have a few more gray hairs, but I finally turn to those people and say, well, what does a professor look like? Because I don't know what a professor is supposed to look like. And so I've grown my confidence now, and I've realized that I'm not so bad at this academic thing. I found where I belong. Which brings us to this guy. I would argue he's probably what some people think a professor should look like, but I also know professors of all shapes, colors, and creeds, so I don't think that there is one way that a professor should look. But I'm showing you this guy because he is the reason I've learned about the concept of an alternative CV. So he's a professor from Princeton, and he's kind of made this concept famous. And so an alternative CV is the list of things that you didn't accomplish. So it's all the jobs you didn't get. It's all the scholarships you were passed over for, all the manuscripts that were rejected, the research experiments that failed. And that list is usually, for any successful person, 2 to 3 times longer than a normal CV, which is only the list of the things that worked out. And it probably represents 80% of the work that you do, whereas a typical CV probably only represents 20% of the work that you do. And I really embrace this concept because I think it is critical, and it takes us to the first skill that I'd like to share with you today, which is learning to fail, which might not be what the organizers were thinking of, I would tell you, when they asked me to do this. But I think in a world where everybody's lives are perfectly curated through social media, it's really hard to sometimes see that we're all struggling, we're all making mistakes, we're all screwing up and failing. And sometimes it can feel like you're the only person that does. And so it becomes a really difficult thing to do with grace. What we need to really learn how to do is to fail, to learn from that, to get up again, and to try again, and to do that over and over and over again, because that's how we grow and that's how we truly learn. It's something I see a lot of people really struggle with, but it's something that's critical to success. Which leads us to our next thing, which is trying stuff. If you're not failing, you're not trying enough things. You're staying in your safe little box, in your comfort zone, and you're not pushing yourself. So I would say that the world is a large, beautiful, complicated, messy thing. And there's so many things out there to see and do and try. And to really grow and gain perspective and become a person who can discover and create new science, you really need to be able to go out there and try things and gain that broader perspective from having had diverse experiences. Which leads me to my next skill, which is ask questions. It's about getting a broader perspective than the narrow one that you start your life off with. It's about learning about other people's perspectives. And I would say that, especially in science, curiosity is key. You want to be curious. and you want to always try and learn more. Don't just think that you already know everything. Ask questions, get engaged in conversations, and try and grow a broader perspective. And I would say that this makes you not only a better scientist, but also a better person. And I would say is one of the hallmarks of a great leader, is trying to really, truly understand various perspectives and the situation around you. Which takes me to my next skill, which is learning to communicate. So this might be the most sort of concrete skill, maybe what they were thinking about when they asked me to do this. But learning to communicate as a professional is a key skill. And I would say both written communication as well as oral presentations. Writing is critical. And so English class is not just about boring you with Shakespeare. It's about giving you a foundation of grammar, spelling, punctuation, all those things that are critical to being taken seriously in the work world. You can't just communicate with emoticons, right? You need to be able to articulate your thoughts and your science clearly. And you can be the most brilliant person in the world, but if you can't put it down on paper in a way that other people can take seriously, you can really undermine your credibility. The other one is speaking skills, taking opportunities like public speaking competitions, debate clubs, anything like that, where you can learn how to present yourself and how to communicate orally is really important. We all get nervous. I'm nervous right now, but the goal is to do it enough that you can gain grounded confidence. So grounded confidence, if it's a concept you haven't heard about, I encourage you to Google Brene Brown and read and listen to anything of hers. But grounded confidence is not that empty confidence where you don't actually know what you're talking about, which I would call arrogance. But grounded confidence is being able to speak with authority because you actually do know your stuff and you've prepared yourself well and you can communicate it clearly so that you can get your message across to your audience. So it's not just about sort of sounding nice, it's about clear and effective communication. So that takes us to our next one, which is finding mentors. And you'll notice that this is not a mentor, it's mentors. So first, I want you to think about the fact that no one can be everything to you. So you don't need one single mentor because they can't do it all. You need different kinds of mentors for different aspects of life and different phases of life. So over time, your mentors might change. So your riding coach in high school might be great for helping you adapt to new situations or gain confidence. They might not be the best person to ask about what college credits to take. So you need to have different kinds of mentors. And I would also suggest that a good mentor is not necessarily the person who seems like they know everything. They're actually probably the person who asks you the difficult questions. So one of my current mentors, he rarely tells me what he thinks. He asks me questions, and often they're tough questions, to help me figure out my own way through the challenge that I'm facing. And I think that's a far more effective and useful mentor. So you want to find people who care about your well-being, who you trust, and who are going to push you and support you through things rather than just tell you all the answers. Which leads us into one of the last skills I have here, which is think, learning to think. And I don't mean learning how to memorize factoids and regurgitate them on a test so you get a 4.0. I mean learning how to critically think for yourself independently and taking all of the information that you get, whether it's, what you find on the internet, what other people are telling you, taking that information in and thinking about it in ways like, does this align with other things I've learned? Does it make sense? Is it logical? Does it align with my own personal values? Having those questions in your mind rather than just blindly believing everything that you're told, critically thinking your way through things. And in the same vein, I would encourage you to even critically think about the things you believe. Am I basing this on assumptions that are unfounded? Do I have all the information to believe what this thing that I think I believe? Is it logical? Really critically assessing all of the pieces of information, both that come from external sources, as well as the things that are rattling around in your own brain. This is sort of my last skill slide, which is working hard, of course. No meaningful achievements are accomplished without a whole lot of hard work first. So you need to learn how to work hard, how to persist through challenges, how to just sweat through it and keep on trying. But at the same time, you need to have fun. Life is too long to just work, work, work. And if you don't take breaks and have some fun along the way, that'll lead to burnout. So it's really critical that you take some time to enjoy life as well as working hard towards your goals. So with that, I'll wrap it up. Hopefully that was roughly the right length of time. I know that they asked me to talk about STEM careers and, professional skill development, but hopefully the things that I've talked about today not only help you pursue any of those options in terms of a STEM career, but any dream that you might have now or dreams you don't even know that you have yet. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions. You can send them to me through email, which is there. You can reach out with a DM on Twitter with my handle is there, Calfcare Claire. So I would love to hear from you if you have questions about university, vet school, science, or just life in general. Please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much.